We demystify what goes on behind the therapy room door. Join us on this voyage of discovery and co-creative conversations. This is the Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast.
With Bob Cooke
and Kellie Barratt.
Hello and welcome to the Therapy Show Behind Closed Doors. My name's Kellie Barratt and I'm here with the wonderful Mr. Bob Cooke.
Hello.
Bob. Hi.
Hello.
Are you well?
I'm very well, dear. Very well. And I hope you are well. I hope the listeners are well.
Yes, me too. And I am well. Good to see you. So, Bob, today we're on episode 217. And our title is Flashbacks and Triggers, How to Deal with Them Effectively Within the Therapy Process.
That's a great title.
It is.
And I had an assessment with somebody today or whenever it was. Was it today? Anyway, she was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. And she was coming because of flashbacks and triggers.
Yes.
And she had flashbacks, but she also was triggered by something that was happening in her current life. So it's an apt podcast. So over to you then. Well, you must have worked with lots of people who've got flashbacks, and I know you know a lot about the concept of triggers.
Yeah. So when clients are experiencing flashbacks in the session, I do everything I can to help keep them grounded. So to help them to stay in the room, stay with me, and so to recognize that they're having the flashback here and now, but actually that was from the past, and in the present they are here with me in the therapy room. So, and I've got lots of different ways of doing that depending on what works.
Do you want to say a few of them?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd tell them to put the feet flat on the floor and help them with their breathing. Depending on the client, sometimes I use the butterfly tapping technique and ask them to copy me. So, you know, the kind of the hands on the shoulders and alternate feet with the hands to help them stop dissociating. So I might get them to do the mindfulness stuff of like, what can they see in the room? So I try and change it up a little bit. So it might be name me 5 green things. But if they can't stay with me and they do go into the flashback, then I concentrate on the breathing. And so they know I'm there whilst it's happening. And yeah, sometimes depending on who it is, I might sit by them and offer them my hand, help them to stay in the room. It depends on the level of it, really. Some clients, I would use ginger or lemon to stop them dissociating and going into the flashback, sorry.
So let's ask a question then about this, because I know you also work on Zoom a bit.
Yeah.
What is it different if somebody has a flashback whilst you're on a Zoom process?
Well, that's never happened before. Yeah. I'm not sure I'd work with somebody on Zoom if they had PTSD or complex PTSD. I think it's more useful to have the client in the room and do face-to-face work.
With flashbacks?
Yeah. Well, I guess a sense of that trauma that they've experienced. I'm not sure I'd want to be working on me personally. I'm not saying it's wrong, but me personally, I'm not sure I'd want to be doing that kind of work online.
Yes, you'd like to. Well, you prefer a face-to-face process working with post-traumatic stress or acute trauma.
Yeah, I would personally, and of course, there's occasions where that can't happen, or it's not convenient. But I do prefer that work to be in the room, so I can be that grounding person, or you know that so there's somebody else in the room to help them to feel safer, so they're not on their own going through it.
And of course, there's different types of flashbacks, isn't there?
Yes, there are.
Now, flashbacks visually, you can have flashbacks where you don't hear the words. You can have flashbacks where you actually do have vision and you hear the words. So there's different types of flashbacks.
Yeah, or the smells, aren't there? So people can smell something and that can be trigger them back into one.
And of course, smell is the last sense that goes.
Oh, is it? What, during the process of the flashback, or do you mean in life?
General hearing, sight, smell. Smell is the most acute sense of all of them.
Okay.
And people, sense is the last thing to go. I mean, smelling is the last thing to go. And smell is a very acute, very important one. If you want to work regressively with people, to work in a sort of, I won't say re-experiencing, but maybe revisiting slightly, you might ask them to describe what they smell. Because the smell will take them back quicker in that regressive process than anything else.
So you're talking about working with the trigger or with the flashback?
The trigger, sorry. Well, yeah, you might. The flashback can take you back just as well, by the way. If you ask them to describe what's happening, what they see, if they haven't got any visuals, what they're hearing, what they're thinking, that might take you back to a regressive state.
So are you talking about when it's not absolutely terrifying for them, or if the client's in absolute terror, would you still do that?
No, I do some grounding techniques first, so we get some level of stabilization.
Yeah.
And then I go from there.
So okay, yeah. So you would do something, well, maybe not the same.
Very similar to you.
Okay.
Some sort of grounding processes.
Yeah.
To get some level of stabilization first, so they're not so overwhelmed. And then, of course, then I have more of a contract to do the regressive work.
Yeah. Well, then they're back in the room, so they can talk, or they are.
I think I said on a podcast to you, maybe even the last one or two times ago, because you inquired about what I meant. But remember, psychological time and real time aren't the same thing. I think I said this to you.
Yes, you did. Yes.
Yeah. So you can stabilize them, and very quickly they can go back to where they were.
Yes.
That's what I mean. They can go back through psychological time to where they were almost. But I think it's good to get some level of stabilization and contract before you do that.
Yeah.
So yes, I would do very similar to you. And flashbacks are very common with people suffering acute trauma.
Yeah.
And of course, triggers all the time. If we're talking about post PTSD disorder, which you were, then that comes with the territory almost.
Yeah. It's a really big indicator of it, isn't it?
So triggers. So Richard Erskine has a word which I also like for the word trigger. Sort of explains, it's more descriptive for me. He talks about triggers like rubber bands that will take you back to the early scene, or remind, like I don't mind the word trigger, but they go together with like a rubber band. That's the motion. So people can get triggered or rubber banded. And in fact, Richard Erskine wrote an article called Rubber Banding, which was all about that as a trigger. So something in the moment triggers them.
So did he kind of coin the rubber banding?
Yes.
idea? Oh, wow. I assumed that was Byrne. Wow.
Well, unless he took it from Byrne, I'd have to read that article to see whether it was referenced from him, because maybe it was. But it's the idea that something can happen in the day, in real time, that takes you back. And that could be out of your awareness. So it's quite often people get triggered. Let's use that, okay, because that's the name of the podcast. Who get triggered in the here and now. And they they may feel and think it's in the here and now, but actually it's not. They're thinking and feeling in past time. So when, as a therapist, it's really important to, especially when we work with trauma, help them to be aware of what triggers them back to the past trauma. Even though what happens is they get the feelings or the thoughts in the present day, but actually comes from somewhere else.
Yes, I use the concept of rubber banding all the time with
Oh,
clients.
do you? I didn't know
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
I
You wrote
love
the
it.
article. I can't. In fact, I was looking at it the other day. It was in one of the transaction analysis journals.
Yeah, that's great. I just assumed that was kind of like, old school TA from the 50s
But
with
it might
Byrne.
be. I don't remember the references. Oh, it wouldn't be for the 50s. If it was a TA term, it would be probably late 60s or something. If it was classic TA.
Yeah, it is a great concept though, and clients really
I don't think it would be Byrne though, because Byrne
yeah.
didn't work with the child ego state.
Yes, of course,
He
yeah.
wanted to, his classic ideas for TA was strengthening the adult ego state.
Yeah.
So the adult ego state is in charge. And any child ego state work or younger self work he sent to the Gestalt therapists of the day or some of the psychodynamic therapists, but he didn't advocate using TA with the younger self. Now, of course, in 2025, it's almost reversed.
Yes, yeah. So we mainly work with the child ego state, do you mean?
Well, I think I'd be interested in your thoughts, but for me, most therapists that I meet in the TA world work with the younger self, work
Yeah.
with the child ego state. Is
Yeah.
that your
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, I agree. I think because that's where the work is really. So
Well, you can work with the adult which is contaminated.
yes. But then once the adult is decontaminated, then we can work with the child. Is that right?
Yeah, now we're getting into words and terminologies and
Yeah, the listeners won't.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
we're going off track, back on track.
It should be a TA podcast. And
Yeah.
perhaps one of my titles, I think the 127th when we get to it, is TA Revisited, where
Oh,
we
okay, yeah.
start talking about some of and explaining some of the terminology. But it's very important, whatever modality a therapist comes from, whether it's Gestalt, whether it's existential therapy, whether it's psychodynamic therapy, whether it's psychosynthesis, any of these disciplines, to help the client be aware of how they might get triggered in the present.
Yeah.
Because that will show unfinished business that the therapist needs to work with the client. Now, usually when clients come into therapy, they have some ideas and they might know the word trigger on what takes them back to a previous time where some healing needs to take place. So they can stay in TA terms again, adult in the present time. So I expect you do the same thing, but I will always, and clients are really up for this, by the way, and they understand it as well. I was always inquire about people's triggers.
Yes, yes. And sorry, I just had a little moment where something just popped into my head, and I just thinking about the Zoom. I was in supervision once with somebody, and someone had PTSD, and we were working online, and the supervisor said to me that in Germany they wouldn't be allowed to work online, and because I don't know actually what the reason is in Germany, but it's kind of making me think actually, the online work, are we, if a client does start having flashbacks and starts unraveling online, like, what should we be doing?
Well, let's take the first statement, which I don't think is true.
That you don't think it's true?
I don't think it's true that in Germany
Yeah.
there is some sort of regulation
Mm.
about therapists not being able to work with trauma online.
Yeah. Okay.
It might be, I stand corrected. I've
Mm.
not heard of that. I
Mm.
know many therapists who work online with German clients.
Mm.
And if you think about it, how on earth can you regulate that? How can you legislate for that? Because most clients that come in have had some form of trauma.
Mm.
No, no, if somebody came today, obviously wanted to work on PTSD and something dreadful happened to her, and I understood that. But many clients may say they have no trauma, and you might be working with them, and then some trauma pops up. It's impossible to regulate that.
Yes. And that does often happen, doesn't it? A client comes in with one thing and then it ends up turning into something else
So
quite quickly.
if your supervisor or whoever said that meant that they weren't in their regulation body or regulating body, because I don't think it's state regulated in Germany, therapy, didn't recommend or that anybody works online with post-traumatic stress disorder. Well, maybe that is the case, but certainly hard to legislate in general trauma. And when you're working with clients, trauma pops up all the time. All the time. So I was asked the other day, quite some time ago actually, to look at an article somebody had written about working aggressively online with devices like Zoom or whatever, Teams or whatever the people use, and the safety and the protection for working aggressively with people online. She wrote an article about it, and it was very interesting. And I hear it's not the sort of topic for this podcast, but there's many reasons why you might not work aggressively with somebody online. Now, of course, maybe people have different things, but what we're completely missing here is, how do we legislate that?
Yeah.
I mean, you could be working with someone online, you could be working face to face, and they might go into aggression as quick as a flash.
Yes. Yeah.
They may change ego states in front of you. So I don't know how we can legislate, really, for the things you're talking about.
Yeah. And I don't mean to misquote the supervisor, and I'm now wondering.
They might be saying, well, in my regulating body in Germany, we recommend that therapists don't work with somebody, and they specifically mean post-traumatic stress disorder rather than general trauma.
Yes, yeah, well, because you're right, most clients have experienced some trauma, yeah. So, but yeah, I think it was the the more extreme end, that kind of unable to regulate themselves kind of client.
So, I was interested earlier on the podcast about, what would you do if somebody, started to unravel on Zoom? So that's what led this discussion.
Yes, yeah. Because the client being able, because it's one thing that happening with us in the room, and we can help to co-regulate or help the client to regulate rather. But it's another thing if the client's having flashbacks regularly outside of the therapy room, and how we can teach them those methods of grounding, but it looks like it's quite hard for some clients to keep hold of that information and maintain it.
I think it's very different. There's a huge amount of therapists that do work online, amazing amount, by the way. And I think it's very different and quite challenging to work with heavy trauma online for many reasons. And from my position, um, safety and protection are the main reasons
Mm.
that I would focus on when I was talking about the therapist working online with somebody heavily traumatized.
Mm. And what do you, when you say safety and protection, like in what specifically, what do you mean?
Well, if you think about you know, Kelly, the most people on Zoom and therapy are probably alone in their room.
Mm. Yeah.
It's a confidential space,
Mm.
usually. Some
Mhm.
people might know they're there, but they're usually alone.
Mhm.
Um, not like they're with their therapist in a room or in a group or
Mm.
whatever it is. Um, and I'd be interested. I think it would be really important for me to talk about protection if you're working with them in areas where they may regress and become much younger.
Mm.
And I'd always be aware that they're alone in that room.
Mm.
So how safe and secure is that space they're in,
Mm.
for example?
Yes, yes, yes.
So that's why it would be a prime importance to me when working online. I don't work online, but it would be.
Mm. And the supervisor I'm thinking of, this was a while ago, the client I was working with was didn't have any private space. So was going out into the car.
Oh,
So
yeah.
having the session in the car, and I was like, I'm not okay with this.
Yeah, so I agree with you.
Mm.
Getting back to the subject of triggers, though, for therapists and counselors listening to this, I think it would be interesting. Maybe people could say something in the box below or the comment section, um, whether they sort of, almost like wrote, if you like, get or inquire about people's triggers
Mm.
present. I do. I'm always want to know what are the triggers or rubber bands in the present that might
Mm.
mean that you, when TA would be go to a childish stage, go to their younger self, because it gives me some indication of healing that's needed. And usually people are very aware of that process.
Mm. So they already know it coming in to therapy.
Yeah, they usually
Mm.
know what things are happening in the here and now,
Mm.
which might remind them in some ways of challenging times in their history.
Mm. Yeah. But usually there's going to be something around the trauma.
I think the majority of clients, regardless what levels of trauma we're talking about, I know there's much more traumas intensely than others.
Mm.
Most people come in with some trauma at
Mm.
some level.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, they do. Yeah, and lots
Um,
of different kinds.
oh yeah, so somebody comes in and says, like they did earlier on, they had something really dreadful happen to them, and they had to stay with PTSD, and they wanted to come back and talk about that. That's very clear. Then you talk about triggers and flashbacks and everything else.
Mm.
But then somebody might come in and say, well, I would like to work on my romantic relationship because I feel quite vulnerable in those areas. And I, I have a habit of getting in repetitive toxic relationships, and I ignore red flags, and I
Mm.
still get into those relationships. Now, if you inquire with them and
Mm.
say, well, what are the triggers in the relationship that perhaps take you back to some challenging times in other relationships,
Mm.
10 to 1 they'll be able to talk about that.
Yeah. So they'll know, they will have kind of joined the dots themselves already.
A lot of them, because they know that, well, not all of them, Caddy, I know that. And I know this the therapist job where you find more triggers.
Mm.
But a lot of clients do think about how the past affects the present.
Yeah.
And they often think and reflect on, well, what's happening in the relationship with X, which actually comes from baggage. Might even use that language, baggage from another relationship.
Mm. Yes. Yes.
I don't always have to use the word trigger.
Mm. Yes. I tend to think of trigger as being, yeah, something very traumatic. that kind of sends them back into the trauma. But actually, yeah, thinking about when you say it as rubber banding, that happens all the time for people.
Mm. And a lot of people think of it as baggage they've taken into other relationships from other relationships, and they can talk about that very easily.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, whether they then make the connection to the significant others, their parents, their uncles, their aunties, and everything else, is another story. But they usually can go back a while.
It's interesting just thinking about the concept of trauma as well, really, because I think people probably think of it as always the really high end.
They do, but it isn't.
It isn't, yes.
Trauma is like it's a continuum of trauma, from lower trauma to intense trauma, and continuums might have other names, like mild trauma to challenging trauma. It might be different names, but there's a continuum of trauma. And some trauma is more intense and more specific and more damaging than other trauma. Now, somebody listening to the podcast might say, well, all trauma is damaging. And it is to a certain extent. Of course it is. You know, one drop of poison is perhaps the same as a beak of poison. But some traumas are more traumatic.
Yes. Yeah.
And may leave more of a mark than others. But, or stroke and, a lot of the things that people come with, depression, anxiety, relationship problems, all those things we're talking about maybe at a neurotic level, may have traumatic bases. So I was just thinking of somebody that came in and she was talking about how she feels she hasn't got much value in a relationship, pretty worthless in a relationship, and she placates, and then she finds herself in relationships where she feels like she's being treated like a doormat. And then, of course, we trace it back to when she was bullied as a child. So they're the important reflections and connections that the client needs to make.
Yeah. Well, it's our job to help them find
those connections.
Yeah.
And then from those connections, we look at, well, what were the coping mechanisms that you put in place so you didn't have to, so you could survive in a more, or say the word in inverted commas, healthy way. Then, so they might say, well, I became a comic, so therefore I averted being bullied. And that's why, and I catch myself minimizing and making myself a comic in my relationships. And you know what? Nobody ever takes me seriously.
Yeah.
There's the connections.
Yeah.
There's the coping mechanisms. And for a lot of clients, they need to update their coping mechanisms.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. Yeah. And kind of work out what's theirs and what's not. And
you were looking at the clock a moment ago, Kellie.
I was, Bob. Yeah, because that's half an hour already gone.
But it's a lovely subject, and it's important, I think, for therapists and counselors to think about how the past affects the present and the triggers in the present which lead to the past.
Yeah. And I think it's a really nice synopsis of how to do that at the end there you've just given, Bob.
Great. Thank you. Oh, just one other thing. Sorry.
Yes.
Smell.
Oh, yes.
Smell is a very evocative and acute sense. And a lot of smells are triggers.
Yes.
Past traumas. And I would advise any counsellor and therapist to trace the smell back from present day to what it meant and help the person make connections so that healing can happen.
Yeah. So the understanding of the flashback will help the client then to make sense of it.
That's right.
Yeah, if we explore it with them and get more information. Anything else you want to add there? Is that it?
Well, I know there's tea waiting for me. I was thinking, is that a trigger? I didn't have much food when I was a child, and there was a lot of trauma about food for me. And I did a lot of therapy about the absence of food. And I think easily sitting around a table with lots of people is very triggering for me.
Are you aware of that before you kind of go and sit down, or?
I did a lot of therapy, and I was in a retreat for a long time where 12 people who all sat down at one table, and I had to learn to be able to do that. I desensitized myself, and I've done a lot of work on that, and I'm still aware of my script when I sit with lots of 3 families together, for example. I can be aware how I might act out. I just not want to be there. So I don't force myself, perhaps, but I force myself through the uncomfortable feelings, so I can, have a different experience.
And it gets easier?
Oh, it's always got easier, even though there's a trait of that there.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. I think it's useful to be really supportive of ourselves going into those kinds of situations, like holding our own hand to help us through.
Yeah, to be a friend.
Yeah, be a friend. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's nice. Okay then, Bob. So our next session, podcast, rather, I keep calling it a session.
Well, we had a lifetime of having sessions, so I can understand much.
Saying session all the time. So our next podcast is, have we got a fix-it culture in psychotherapy today?
Great.
So I'll see you next week, and I look forward to talking about that. Take care, Bob. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to The Therapy Show, Behind Closed Doors podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. We'll be back next week with another episode.